feet. All of those kind of things it has in there.
And I promise I will continue bodybuilding for the rest of my life. Goodbye and thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
I only stopped competing, but I'm not stopping bodybuilding. It's the greatest sport. Thank you.
Before the world knew him as the Hulk, Lou Ferrigno was just a boy growing up in silence, born with severe hearing loss. Every word felt distant, but the laughter and mockery cut through clear. He found refuge in the gym, rusted plates, cold bars, and the kind of work no one could take away. From that pain rose not just muscle, but presence, a force of will that carried him from the shadows of a Brooklyn basement to the blinding lights of the bodybuilding stage, and eventually, Hollywood itself. So grab your pre-workout, take a deep breath, and step into his world. This is the origin of the Hulk. Lou Ferrigno was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1951. And right from the start, life put obstacles in his way. As a baby, he suffered from an ear infection that was left untreated. The damage was permanent. Lou lost most of his hearing, leaving him with only about a quarter of the world's sounds. Growing up, that silence was constant. Imagine being a kid who could only catch pieces of sentences, never quite following conversations, always feeling one step removed. Hearing aids back then weren't small or discreet. They were bulky and obvious, and in the rough neighborhoods of Brooklyn, they made him an easy target. Children can be cruel, and Lou took the full weight of it. He was teased for how he spoke, mocked for wearing the devices, and branded as different before he even had the chance to prove himself. At school, he was isolated. At home, life wasn't much gentler. His father, a New York police lieutenant, was strict and demanding. Instead of encouragement, Lou often heard harsh words. He was told he would never measure up. Think about that, hearing your own father doubt you, when the world outside was already doing the same. For many kids, that kind of rejection would have broken them. For Lou, it became fuel. He needed somewhere to escape, somewhere to imagine himself stronger than the world around him. He found it in comic books, Superman, Spider-Man, and most of all, the Hulk. The Hulk was mocked, feared, misunderstood, yet unstoppable when the anger came. That story connected to Lou in a way nothing else did. It planted a promise inside him. One day, he would build himself into someone no one could ignore. Every insult, every laugh, every moment of silence would be answered with strength. Lou's first taste of strength didn't come from polished gyms with chrome plates or celebrity trainers. It began in the cramped bedroom of a teenager who refused to be forgotten. At 13, he scavenged what he could: rusty barbells, homemade weights, and muscle magazines that became his textbooks. While other kids were at parties, Lou was bent over those pages, studying the physiques of Steve Reeves, the movie Hercules. He filled notebooks with routines, scribbled training logs, and then put every word into practice. There was nothing casual about it. Lou wasn't just lifting, he was building an identity. Each curl, each press, each rep carried a purpose. He didn't just want muscles, he needed armor, and the results came quickly. By his late teens, his body began to change at a speed that stunned even his neighbors. His frame stretched tall, his shoulders widened, and his arms swelled until they looked sculpted out of stone. People who once mocked him stopped in their tracks, whispering about the giant who had risen from the same Brooklyn streets. But strength wasn't only in the mirror. Lou's numbers started to show in gyms across New York. He benched more than 500 pounds. His squat pushed past 600. His arms stretched past 23 inches, bigger than most men's thighs. For a boy who had grown up unheard, this was a new language, spoken in iron, just impossible to ignore. And yet, Lou wasn't chasing trophies then. He was chasing respect, chasing the right to stand tall in a world that had told him to sit down. The gym became his refuge, his battleground, and his temple. And from that temple, a legend was about to step onto the stage. After a few years of lifting, Lou's training had become his whole world. He didn't have the kind of equipment you see in modern gyms. Most of what he did came down to barbells, dumbbells, and endless sets. He trained 6 days a week, sometimes for hours, hammering every muscle group until there was nothing left in the tank. Chest and back on Monday, shoulders and arms the next day, legs in between. and then he'd do it all again. His sessions weren't short, they were long and punishing, and he never cut corners. Lou had a way of making every rep count. He kept tension on the muscle by refusing to rest at the top of a movement, forcing his body to stay under pressure. It hurt, but that was the point. If you've ever done curls without locking out, you know the kind of burn it creates. Lou trained like that on almost everything. For him, growth came from staying in the pain as long as possible. The food matched the training. He ate every few hours, not by appetite, but by discipline. Breakfast might be a stack of eggs with fruit and whole milk. Lunch and dinner were built around steak, potatoes, and vegetables. In between, he'd snack on nuts, cheese, or sandwiches. Before workouts, he mixed milk with eggs and fruit for quick energy. Even at night, he kept protein close so his body could recover while he slept. It wasn't complicated. No designer supplements, no tricks, just heavy lifting, steady eating, and the determination to repeat it every single day. That routine, repeated for years, is what turned the quiet kid from Brooklyn into a man whose size seemed impossible to ignore. Next time you're in the gym, try Lou's rule. Don't end the set until the muscle begs you to stop. That pain, that's where growth lives. By the early 70s, Lou Ferrigno was too big to not notice. At 21, Lou already looked like he had stepped out of a comic book. At that young age, he shocked the bodybuilding world by winning the IFBB, Mr. America, and Mr. Universe titles. The shy kid, who once struggled to be heard, was now being called the future of the sport. But the mountain ahead was enormous, and it had a name: Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold already carried 5 Mr. Olympia titles and walked on stage with the kind of confidence that could intimidate anyone. He was polished and unbeatable in the eyes of many. Then there was Lou, raw and still finding his rhythm. Fans whispered that maybe this was the challenger who could finally push the king. Have you ever stood next to someone everyone thought was untouchable and refused to step back? That was Lou against Arnold. Their collision reached its peak in 1975 at the Mr. Olympia in South Africa. The buildup was captured in Pumping Iron, a documentary that brought bodybuilding to the mainstream. The cameras showed 2 very different men. Arnold joked, smiled, and carried himself like the title was already his. Lou trained in a cramped gym in Brooklyn, driven hard by his father, eyes locked on the chance to prove himself. When the lights hit the stage, the battle felt bigger than bodybuilding. Arnold's symmetry and presence won him another title. Lou placed 3rd, but even in defeat, something shifted. The audience didn't just see a contest. They saw a story. The giant chasing the legend. And that story carried Lou far beyond the stage, straight into Hollywood's spotlight. After Pumping Iron, Lou Ferrigno's world shifted. Overnight, people who had never followed bodybuilding now knew his name. They didn't just see him as the young man standing beside Arnold anymore. They saw the hungry underdog on the big screen. That image traveled beyond gyms and fitness magazines. It landed in Hollywood. In the late 70s, producers were searching for someone to play the lead in a new television series based on The Incredible Hulk. The challenge was obvious. How do you convince an audience that an ordinary man could explode into a monster of pure muscle? This was long before CGI. The only tools available were paint, prosthetics, and camera tricks. None of that mattered, unless the actor himself looked like the Hulk before the makeup even started. At first, Lou wasn't even in the picture. The role went to Richard Kiel, the actor famous for playing Jaws in the James Bond films. Kiel had height, but when the cameras rolled, it didn't work. He looked tall, but not terrifying. The Hulk wasn't supposed to be lanky. He had to look unstoppable. That's when Lou's name came up. 6'5", close to 300 pounds, with arms that stretched 23 inches around. He didn't need padding. He was the real thing. When Lou got the call, he hesitated. He wasn't an actor. He had never trained for the screen. He was still focused on bodybuilding. But the chance to play the Hulk, the same hero who had inspired him as a lonely kid in Brooklyn, was impossible to turn down. The audition ended quickly. Lou didn't need dialogue. His presence filled the room. Within weeks, contracts were signed. Lou Ferrigno was about to live the role that defined his life. When people turned on their TVs in the late 70s, they saw the Hulk ripping shirts, smashing walls, and roaring with fury. What they didn't see was what Lou Ferrigno went through just to get in front of the camera. Every shooting day started with hours in the chair, 2, sometimes 3 hours, while makeup artists covered his body in thick green paint, sprayed his hair black, reshaped his eyebrows, and glued prosthetics to his face. The chemicals were harsh, the process suffocating, and he had to sit motionless through all of it. And that was only the warm-up. The costume didn't make things easier. The boots were heavy, the pants were tight, and under the burning studio lights, the paint trapped heat against his skin. Sweat poured until it streaked the makeup, forcing constant touch-ups that made long days even longer. Then came the stunts. Lou didn't have stunt doubles taking the impact. When the Hulk broke through a wall, Lou was the one crashing through. When the Hulk tossed men across a room, it was Lou doing the lifting. Every roar on screen was backed by veins and muscle working at full capacity. The damage piled up, pulled muscles, bruised ribs, scraped skin. Still, he showed up the next morning and did it again. That's what the role demanded. To the audience, the Hulk looked invincible. Behind the scenes, Lou was grinding through pain, heat, and exhaustion to make it believable. That's real strength. Not the kind measured by a barbell, the kind that keeps going when everything tells you to stop. Lou endured it all because this was his chance to prove he wasn't just playing the Hulk, he was living it. On screen, Lou Ferrigno looked like a force of nature. The Hulk smashed through walls without hesitation, hurled men like they were rag dolls, and stood tall as if nothing could hurt him. But away from the cameras, the reality was very different. The set of The Incredible Hulk wasn't a glamorous Hollywood playground. It was grueling. Low-budget television in the late 70s, where shortcuts were common, and the actors often paid the price. Lou did most of his own stunt work. If the script called for the Hulk to break through a wall, he was the one taking the hit. If a fight scene needed a body to be thrown across the room, it was Lou supplying the strength, take after take, until the director was satisfied. Those walls weren't always as soft as they looked. Splintered wood cut into his arms, jagged edges scraped his skin, and heavy furniture left him bruised. More than once he limped off set with a strained muscle or jammed finger, only to return the next morning to do it again. The grind didn't end when the director yelled cut. Because of the hours of makeup required, Lou often couldn't relax during breaks like the other actors. He couldn't simply step out of costume, grab coffee, or chat with the crew. The green paint had to stay flawless. Even scratching his face could ruin hours of work. So he sat alone, sweating under the lights, waiting for the cameras to roll again. That kind of isolation wore on him as much as the stunts did. Yet Lou endured it all. He understood that this role was bigger than the pain. It was his chance to prove himself to the world, to show that the quiet boy from Brooklyn, who once hid in comic books, had become the hero he always dreamed of. Every bruise, every lonely hour was part of the price, and Lou was willing to pay for it. By the late 70s, Lou Ferrigno's life had changed completely. Every week, millions of viewers sat in front of their televisions to watch him transform into the Hulk. Children wore his face on t-shirts, action figures filled toy shelves, and his roar echoed through living rooms across America. For many, Lou wasn't an actor in makeup. He was the Hulk made real. He carried that power into public appearances, visiting hospitals in full paint to lift the spirits of children who believed their hero had stepped off the screen. For Lou, who had grown up mocked for his hearing and ignored by his peers, the recognition was overwhelming. For the first time in his life, people looked at him with admiration. But fame carried its own weight. Hollywood could see his strength, but often stopped there. Casting directors offered roles, yet nearly all of them followed the same pattern. The silent enforcer, the bodyguard, the heavy with only a few lines. Lou's size, the gift that had given him a career, also narrowed it. The public and the industry wanted the Hulk, not the man who played him. At the same time, bodybuilding, the world he had fought so hard to enter, was slipping from his grasp. The demands of filming left little time for competition. By the time he tried to return, the sport had moved forward. Arnold had already taken the crown, built his legend, and was moving into Hollywood on his own terms. Lou's window seemed to be closing. Still, he didn't give in to bitterness. The Hulk had given him an audience, and he chose to use it. Even as he wrestled with typecasting, he kept pushing to show there was more to him than one role. Lou Ferrigno refused to let the green paint define the rest of his story. When The Incredible Hulk ended in 1982, Lou Ferrigno faced a challenge that was in many ways harder than anything he had done before. For years, his entire identity had been tied to the green paint, the prosthetics, and the monster that millions of people had invited into their homes. Now the show was over, and Lou had to answer a question every actor dreads: what comes next? He continued acting, landing roles in television shows like The Fall Guy and Matt Houston, and even reprising the Hulk in a series of made-for-TV movies. But Hollywood still struggled to imagine him as anything other than muscle. Casting directors sent him scripts that asked for gladiators, thugs, or silent warriors. His enormous frame guaranteed he would be noticed, but it also meant his range as a performer was rarely tested. Lou wanted more, but the industry seemed determined to keep him in the same mold. Rather than wait for Hollywood to change, he began to build his own path. Lou created a business around fitness, releasing workout videos, writing training guides, and eventually opening gyms. He knew his name carried weight in the bodybuilding world, and he leaned into that influence. For many young lifters, Lou became more than the Hulk. They saw him as a teacher, someone who could guide them toward building strength without shortcuts. He also returned to competition in a surprising way. In 1992, after nearly 20 years away from the Olympia stage, Lou stepped back under the lights. Most men his age were slowing down, but Lou wanted to prove he still belonged. At 41 years old, Lou walked on stage at 290 pounds. Even by today's standards, the sheer size was shocking. Fans couldn't believe the same man who once battled Arnold was now bigger than ever. Outside of competition, Lou built a quieter life. He married, raised a family, and worked as a personal trainer for celebrities. One of his most surprising clients was Michael Jackson, who trusted Lou to prepare him physically for touring. It was a reminder that even when the spotlight faded, his knowledge and presence were still sought after. The Hulk had opened the door, but it was Lou's persistence that kept him relevant long after the cameras stopped rolling. It has been decades since Lou Ferrigno first stepped onto a set and painted his body green, but his shadow still stretches across both fitness and popular culture. Every time a new actor plays the Hulk, Eric Bana, Edward Norton, Mark Ruffalo, the comparisons immediately begin. Fans always circle back to the original. Lou's Hulk wasn't special effects. It wasn't pixels on a screen. It was a man, drenched in sweat, enduring hours of makeup, throwing himself through walls and making the role believable because he lived it. But his impact runs deeper than television. In bodybuilding, Lou remains a symbol of persistence. He stood toe-to-toe with Arnold Schwarzenegger during the sport's golden age, and while he never claimed the Mr. Olympia crown, his presence mattered. He showed that legacy isn't built only by winning trophies. It's built by daring to chase giants and refusing to quit. His comeback in the early 90s, stepping on stage at 41, weighing nearly 290 pounds, reminded the world that age doesn't erase discipline. For people living with disabilities, Lou's journey carries even greater meaning. As a child with severe hearing loss, he was told again and again that he wouldn't fit in, that he wouldn't succeed. He turned that silence into strength and proved every doubter wrong. Fans who met him often spoke about his patience and kindness, how he leaned in to hear them and gave them his full attention. The same condition that once isolated him became a way to connect. Lou Ferrigno may always be remembered as the Hulk, but his true legacy is larger than a single role. He proved that strength isn't just muscle. It's resilience, endurance, and the courage to write your own story. Lou Ferrigno may have left the green paint behind, but the Hulk never left him. His story isn't about trophies or fame. It's about turning silence into strength and proving that persistence outlasts every setback. From a bullied kid in Brooklyn to a global icon, Lou showed what's possible when you refuse to quit. So ask yourself, what's your Hulk moment? What challenge can you turn into power? If this story inspired you, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. More legends are coming, and you won't want to miss the next one. See you in the next video.